Hello and welcome back to the Jump Show Cheltenham series. We had a fairly poor week of racing this week in comparison to last, but obviously plenty of action still to talk about. I'll head over to you boys. How are you doing, Dan? How was your weekend?
Yeah, very nice, mate. Thank you. And I can tell that intro definitely wasn't written down. It was
Dreadful.
yep, absolutely. So hopefully the show is better than the intro and we'll be all right.
Oh, tough one. And Jake, how are you as well?
Yeah, not bad. We're getting into that time now where everyone's being put away till Cheltenham, aren't we? But yeah, we've got a couple to discuss.
We'll kick things off with Edward Stone, who enhanced his claims for the Arkle this weekend. What did you make of his performance, Dan?
Yeah, there's a lot to like about him. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have had him pegged as Arkle favourite early on in the season. I mean, he was a very solid hurdler, but not top class. But you'd be failed to be impressed by the way he's been going through things. He jumps very nicely. He's not the most flashy two-miler in the world, but he gradually winds things up and others can't seem to go with him. So there's an awful lot to like. And you'd say, based on what we've seen thus far in the two-mile division, he's probably the rightful favourite. I think his opposition was respectable. I mean, obviously, third time lucky. And Bravemansgame the second and third favourites for the British for the Arkle. So he beat the best of what we seemingly have to offer on this side of the Irish Sea. Third time lucky now, just a bit of a frustrating character maybe. He travels extremely well in his races, doesn't often find much. Maybe it looks like they're going to dodge Cheltenham with him and maybe go straight to Aintree. And if they ride him aggressively like they were at the start of the season, I can see that really suiting him. To be honest, I think he's the type that might end up even in a county hurdle next year, because I think he's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place over fences next season. But Bravemansgame as well, back in third, he was a progressive sort, like won very nicely in a couple of handicaps. So the form is probably quite solid in terms of how British novice form stacks up. So yeah, a thoroughly impressive performance from Edward Stone.
And Jake, have you got any more to add on that one at all?
Yeah, I mean, I always love his jumping. I think he really attacks his fences and he always seems to make up ground at, every single jump. Yeah, he did what he had to do. It was a comfortable victory, wasn't it? Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that blew me away. But I think it's just mad, isn't it, how we've got to a position where there's been a set of circumstances where the last year's county hurdle fifth is now the favourite for the Arkle and one of the, more likely winners. It's a bit mad, but yeah, I found it really strange as well that they ran third time lucky, considering they blamed Sandown on him having 3 runs in the space of a month, and then 14 days after Doncaster they send him out again. So it makes sense that they're going to skip Cheltenham. I wouldn't fancy a Cheltenham either way, but yeah, makes sense that they'll skip that, go straight to Aintree. And then Bravemansgame, he was raised £1 to 146, so he's feasibly treated for the Grand Annual, and I'm sure he'll have a good crack at that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, if I'm honest with you, Jake, because I had a bit of a bee in my bonnet over this horse. Everyone is really raving about him. I sort of take a back step on this podcast, but this is a horse I really thought that both of you two would just agree on, and you'd say, jumps nicely, ran well, yada this, yada that. But yeah, no, I'm sort of reluctant to think that Edward Stone is an Arkle horse, and maybe I just need to come to the realization that this year's Arkle is of a lower standard than previous ones. As you mentioned it quite well there, the best piece of form he has on offer is beating third time lucky. First time rounded, ran in 3 quick races. This time he was backing up after like 2 weeks, and then I thought they were going to spend another 4 weeks and then go to the Arkle. I just think it's an awful campaign for third time lucky. And I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where my one thing about this is I don't know where the progression is going to come from Edward Stone, because he'll be going into Cheltenham after 6 runs. He's shown his hand. There's other horses in the race, like Blue Lord, for instance, who's only ran 3 times. There could be more to come from him. I think there's
thinking this earlier,
yeah.
This has got very Duke to Geneva Arkle vibes this year, where we've kind of had the real fancy ones fall by the wayside. We're left with what seems a decent field with some horses with not exactly conventional profiles, i.e. they weren't top class grade 1 novice hurdlers or anything. And we end up in a situation where we let like a Willie Mullins top, one of his best novices, go off at a really attractive price. I was thinking about this earlier, and is Blue Lord, should he really be like 3 to 1 second fav, being 3 from 3 over fences, 1 at grade 1 as well? I think past mistakes of forgetting these types of horses and almost ruling them out after one maybe less than ideal impressive run, he might be falling back into that trap again.
Yeah, I would definitely be taking the Blue Lord price and just chancing that he can improve. And I mean, he may already be ahead. We don't know how these form lines match up yet, do we? So, these horses could be way ahead of Edwardstone anyway. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I'd much rather chance that price.
Just the last thing I'll say on it is, and I know you'll argue different conditions, different distances, different tracks. There was only 4 lengths between Edwardstone and Third Time Lucky. I know he did it easy enough, but I'd find it very hard to believe that Riviere de Tau and Blue Lord wouldn't have been 10 to 15 lengths in front of him that day if he had turned up at Leopardstown, for instance. But we'll move on to Bravemansgame, who he won despite Nichols's yard being well out of form, and maybe the chips are going to fall right for him, and he could absolutely bolt up at Cheltenham because Ahoy Senor looks like he's not going to go. Galloping Deschamps and Bob Olinger, could face off against each other, and he could just basically pick up a really fairly weak race. Jake, what did you think about Bravemansgame?
Yeah, well, first off, hats off to Paul Nicholls, obviously, for running him in the handicap. Most trainers wouldn't even dream of running their, a horse in a race where they have to give away £16, let alone their standout, grade 1 novice chaser, their big Cheltenham hope. So yeah, fair play to him for running him. He jumped as well as ever, won it fairly comfortably. Again, it was one of his performances where it didn't blow me away by any means. And I don't think it enhances his reputation for Cheltenham, but it's good that they got another run into him if that's what they thought they needed. And yeah, it really all hinges now on if Galloping Deschamps is going to turn up, doesn't it? I think if Galloping does turn up to the Brown advisory, then it's going to be very difficult for him. But if he, as you just said, if he doesn't turn up, then it could be a bit of a freebie for him. So yeah, it's one of these races now where it's hinging on a couple of horses. We've got this a lot in the novice races at the minute. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I thought Pat's Fancy ran well enough in second. He'd have a chance in the National Hunt Chase, considering his yard was so out of form going into that race, as well as Gordon's, as well as Paul's, obviously. But the only problem with the National Hunt Chase is it seems to be getting stronger by the day, with Gordon throwing in like Brayside and Fury Road into the picture now as well. It seems like a pretty strong race. So yeah, I think Bravemansgame was good, and yeah, just hats off to Connections for giving a run in a handicap.
What about yourself, Dan? Are you sort of in agreement that this could just become a freebie for him at Cheltenham? What did you take of his performance as well?
Well, the race being a freebie is very much up for debate. We're going to see how that plays out, and I'll be remiss to call it either way. I still do have a feeling that Galloping Deschamps will end up in the 3 miler, and I just wonder, the way Bravemansgame is as a horse, he's got very high cruising speed and he jumps very well. I've just always queried when I've seen him, and maybe it's because he hasn't needed to pull it out in most of his races, but how much does he find for pressure? Because I think when he jumped the last, he was about 4 lengths ahead of Pat's Fancy, and he finished about 4 lengths ahead. He's never really extended once asked. He's always just kind of cruised through his race on the bridle very impressively. He jumps horses into submission and then doesn't really need to pull out the extra. And maybe I'm being a bit harsh on him. Maybe he hasn't had to do it, or maybe it's just the memory of Bob Olinger swatting him away so easily at Cheltenham makes me think he doesn't quite have the extra gear that these real top notchers do. I mean, if he comes up against Galloping Deschamps, he's going to have to find under pressure in that race. It's just a fact. So that'll be a great test to see where he's at. Like, was he now like a rate 164, I think, over fences now? So he's got one hell of a high rating for a novice, and that's just kind of a result of the way he's been campaigned. And ultimately, he's an extremely likable individual. I say it's just that one small query I have about how much does he find under pressure. But as I say, he hasn't had the chance to fully show how much he does.
Got the same mark as Galloping Deschamps, as what the Irish handicap has got at Galloping Deschamps at. So they're off the levels if they were to meet in that round. We'll move on to Eldorado Alan. We don't have to talk about him too much because, for perfect honesty with you, despite winning this, I don't really see him as a Cheltenham contender. He's not really a top notcher, but fair play. He's now a dual grade 2 winner, winning over 2 miles and 3 miles. I was going to ask whether you think he'd go to the Ryanair or the Gold Cup, but I believe we had announced today that he's going to go to the Ryanair. So what did you think of the performance, Jake, and how do you reckon he'll fare on the Ryanair?
Yeah, it's just one of these middling grade 2 races, isn't it, that gets run, and sometimes we get a nice horse turn up at odds on or something, and other times we just get a load of grade 2 horses that are what they are, grade 2 horses. They're very admirable, and you'd love to own one. But for me, yeah, this race didn't inspire me whatsoever. Eldorado, went and won it. Royal Pagaille probably showed that he wants, softer ground, and basically looks like a bit of a haydock horse now, doesn't he? But yeah, as you said, connections seem to be favouring the Ryanair. It's probably the smarter route to go down with him. And yeah, good luck to them, but I don't see him winning any Grade 1s anytime soon.
Dan, I want your opinion on Eldorado Allen, but I also want to ask you about Clan des Obeaux. Will you just want to put a line through that run, given the yards form, or maybe now he's just 10 years old and time's not on his side?
I'd say in terms of Clan, you'd have to be a bit hesitant because he never looked happy in that race, really. He was never travelling the way he usually does. He's normally very strong for his races, and it just wasn't the case here. I think if you were on the treble, everyone was on the Nichols treble after Bravemansgame went in, you probably were throwing the slip out basically halfway around here because he could just tell he wasn't going. So probably I'd be slightly cautious of him next time out. But in terms of Eldorado Allen, I'd say Connections were a bit gutted they didn't at least chuck an entry for the Gold Cup. If they knew they were going to try stuffing up in trip, why didn't they give him a bit of an entry here? Because he's still very unexposed over these staying trips and he's bred to appreciate it. I mean, I think he's half brother to about 5 winners, most of which are stayers, including Auvergnat, who won over 4 miles in the Latouche Cup. So it always promised to bring out the best of him. He always promised to be a very decent horse. Whether he's elite Grade 1 level, probably not. But this year's Gold Cup, I mean, most of the runners have some kind of question around them. So I think he would have had a better chance in that, or a better each way shout than he does probably in the Ryanair. I don't really see how he gets involved. I mean, if I was him now, I wouldn't really be wanting to supplement him for quite a large fee. I'd probably just go straight to Aintree. But I think this is kind of his trip now. I wouldn't want to be dropping him back anytime soon.
We'll move on to Journey with Me. This is another horse who's running for a yard that's been fairly out of form. And I personally was quite unimpressed with him. Most probably wants to step up in trip. I imagine they're quite glad they went for this rather than going to the Dublin Racing Festival because he would have been beaten well out of sight in that. Is this a case, Dan, of a horse who just has underperformed on the day, or have horses just improved past him after that maiden run, which obviously worked out so well?
I think it's overly harsh to judge him based on this race alone. And to be honest, I'd say they'd probably be a bit remiss if they didn't go for the 2 mile 6er because they might have found out a bit more about him because they found nothing really here. It was an absolute mess of a race. They crawled around for the first circuit, and Henry de Brumman was quite insightful afterwards. And he said they didn't really want to make the running with him again because he's already done it on his first 2 starts. They wanted to get him in behind for a bit of education, but Rachel had no choice. Like she literally needed to inject some pace into this race, otherwise it would have just been a complete farce. And the way things panned out with O'Toole running no kind of race whatsoever and it being such a slow gallop, it was never going to see him to best effect. We know he's more of a galloping type. He's going to be a 3 miler in time. And I guess we have more questions than answers about him still at this stage. I'd be of the opinion that in a Ballymore, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 too quick for him. I think in time, he'll be a nice 3 miler. Jerry Colomb is now out of the Albert Bartlett. So whether they are now considering more the option to go up to 3 miles with Rob Core, it might be on the cards for him and he'd probably have a better winning chance in that race. So I'd say there's more questions than answers from this, really. I think he's still a lovely prospect, but for a novice hurdle at Cheltenham, I wouldn't be in a rush to back him.
Have you got any more to add on that at all, Jake?
Yeah, it's just that obviously Henry de Brumman's always really said that he's a bit more of a staying type than obviously there was lots of comparisons to Bob Ollinger because they won the same bumper, etc. And he's always said that Journey with Me is more of a staying type. So yeah, I do agree. I think that the Albert Bartlett would be the better option for him. As much as I wouldn't want him to run there just because I'm on Manila Crooner. But yeah, as Rob Cole said today, that the Ballymore is still plan A at the minute, but there's going to be no decision made until the weekend before Cheltenham. So, you know, obviously it's still going to be in their minds with Jerry Colomb coming out. But yeah, the performance was just, yeah, he just ground out, didn't he? The mare in second, choice of words is useful, but nothing, you know, nothing that would set a Grade 1 standard or anything like that. And yeah, as Dan mentioned, I think if either one of Willie's potential supreme defectors came into the Ballymore, then I think there's no chance that Journey with Me would have the same kind of pace as they do in the Ballymore.
We'll move on to some questions which we asked on Twitter. If you don't already, go check us out on Twitter. You'll find all of our links down below in the description, and or you could just comment them down below and we'll make sure to answer them for you. So the first one I've got is which short-priced favourite are you most against? And obviously give a why as well. And I'll go to you, Jake. Who's that for you?
Yeah, so I'm going to the Mares Novices Hurdle, and it's Allegory de Vasi that I'm most against. So she's like 5-2, 9-4 type price, which I think is plenty short enough. So firstly, it's a really hot division. So there was 42 entries out today, and 14 of them are trained by Willie Mullins. So that says a lot about it already. I think there's so many different angles you could take against her. So you've got Brandy Love. You could say that going back left-handed, she's going to reverse that form. You've got Dino Blue, who Connections have decided to send fresh to the festival after one racecourse start. So they obviously rate her quite highly, and she's going to be a massive unknown quantity in the race. LS Bell, Connections have kind of said today that they might just skip Cheltenham and go to Aintree over 2.5 miles because they think she's more of a 2.5 mile horse, having won over 2 mile, 3.5 furlongs the other day at Huntingdon. Party Central looked decent in that handicap. Grangee, you could make the angle that if she didn't fall, that she would have finished a lot closer. And then, there's plenty of other lively outsiders as well from, Britain and Ireland. She has to give away a £5 penalty, which again is another real negative in a field that's full of good horses. I just think she doesn't deserve to be as short as she is. The one I would also mention, it's a bit more controversial, is I wouldn't be backing Facel Vega at odds on. I know he was super impressive. I was really impressed with his last run. But I just think there is a decent group of bumper horses, especially even the ones from his own stable. And I'm just not sure he definitely deserves to be odds on. But it's hard to pick holes in him. But he would be another one I won't be backing. But Allegory Devassi is the main one I'm against.
For me personally, if you just want to rewind back to the start of the video and go to the Edwardstone timestamp, and you'll find my little rant there. And I think, Edwardstone is most probably the short price favourite I'm most against. And Dan, who's it going to be for you?
Statler for me, National Hunt Chase. We've just seen this script too many times before, haven't we? Willie Mullins, lightly raced chaser, flashy profile. It's just not what this kind of race is about. As Jake alluded to earlier, this race is getting stronger by the minute, it would seem. I mean, after Gigginstown almost point blank refusing to run any in the race, seems like Run Wild Fred's going to come here, and he looks tailor-made for this. I'd be siding with him at the prices all day long. Fury Road all of a sudden is going to turn up. I mean, I've got a love-hate relationship with that horse, but on his day, he's a proper chaser, and he's already won a Grade 1 this season. Vanillier showed his liking for Cheltenham last year, on the ropes and Brayside, a very highly rated, experienced handicappers. So Pat's Fancy as well, ran well behind Bravemansgame. Like, there's more and more now coming to the fore in this race who seem almost confirmed as their target. So at 5-2 for Statler, that seems short for me, considering he disappointed at last year's festival as well.
We'll move on to the next question, which is, can we get an Ireland versus Great Britain score prediction out of you with some good reasonings? I actually made...
always depressing.
I made a score prediction on a video, which I will put into the description below if you want to go check that out. And I was a little bit more ambitious about our chances, although the closer we get to the festival, the more I'm thinking how wrong I was to think that we
You've just written off one of our favourites in Edwardstone, like one of our shortest prices. We've written that off.
At the time of making the video, Fernie Hollow was there anyway. So, and also to add to that question as well, we got one that was, do you see the harsher handicapping of Irish runners and the lenient handicapping of the UK runners affecting the results of the Cheltenham handicaps? So I suppose your predictions will sort of give an indication to that anyway. But I'll head over to you, Dan. How bad could it be for us this year?
So I have the total score being 19 to Ireland and 9 to Great Britain. Okay. I have the daily score being 5-2 on days 1, 2, and 3, and then 4-3 on day 4. I've given the Ultimate, the Supreme, Champion Chase, Coral Cup, Plate, the Stayers, Albert Bartlett County, and the Hunters Chase, all to Britain. Very quick run through each race, and maybe some internal bias based on things I've already factored into that. No, scratch that. A lot of internal bias based on some of those. Yeah. I mean, the three on day 4, I mean, I've all backed on this series. So clearly I'm going to be plumping for those ones. But look, Ireland are going to win. They're massive favourites for the Presbytery Cup, but I don't think it'll be as bad as last year. As for the handicapping implications this year, look, it's not all about just pure weight. I think a lot of it is to do with the campaigning of horses. I think all you have to do is look at the Martin Pipe as being one of the prime examples. The amount of numerous future Grade 1 winners that race has churned out, most of which were Irish trained novices, it kind of speaks for itself about how they end up in these races. Whereas our novices, if there was any of that potential, they'd probably be in the championship races. It's just a very different kind of culture. Obviously, they have less novice hurdles as well. That equals more competitive races. So their novices tend to be more experienced, battle hardened, but they're still relatively unexposed. So for all that, the lenient treatment of British horses may play a part. And I think it will be more of an impact for future years, not necessarily this year, because there's still a bit of work to be done down the line for this. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. Britain are still going to win their fair share. I can see they're going to probably win the Ultimate, as they always do, but I'd still probably be wanting to side with the Irish as opposed to the British in handicaps, especially over hurdles, especially with their novices.
And you, Jake, what did you think of the Prestbury Cup this year?
Yeah, so I went for it, and I think there's 3 that Ireland won't win, being the Ultima, the Coral Cup, and the Champion Chase. And then I think there's 6 that are about 50-50. So like the Supreme, the Arkle, the Stayers, the Plate, the County, and the Hunters Chase. So I've made it around allowing for Galloping potentially taking on Bob and maybe like 1 or 2 random results. I've gone for 20-8. So me and Dan are pretty close there. But yeah, as we said, so towards the handicapping side, I think looking at this Betfair hurdle, this were Napper's Hill was 135, which looked very attractive, 6th. Broomfield Berg 134, 7th. JPR 130, 13th, and Jetwell 133, 14th. Like based on that evidence, we're not seeing the results that we were expecting for these perceived to be lower marks. But also, what I think we've got to remember is this time last year we were banging on about how bad these marks were, and for racing the handicap for them being so high. So I think they've just come back down to a level which is fair. I don't think it's necessarily going to see massive improvement. Like I do think the British will still win some handicaps, obviously. The Ultima, as Dan mentioned, the Coral and the Plate, they've got good chances. The County, they'll have a chance as well. But overall, the Irish have got like the Kinmure, Frontal Assault and the Gordon Elliott types. They're really short. You've got the Martin Pipe, where there's always one that is absolutely chucked in. The Grand Annual, where if you look at the market,
Buddy
there's
Rich
quite a lot of Irish horses. Buddy Roach, exactly, is going to win it for us. You've got the Potemps, where it's always the Irish plot jobs that are going for that, and you've got the Boodles, where again the front of the market is just packed full of Irish horses. So yeah, I think they'll probably the British will still pick up handicaps, but so will the Irish. Like looking at the marks that they've been getting as well, just on the other side of what Irish have been putting up, it's pretty much in line with what it normally is. So Dan obviously broke down all the Gordon Elliott marks that were given out in January. And the hurdlers were basically getting £6 on average, and the chasers were getting £5 on average. Like that's pretty in line with what we expect for the British handicapper to do at Cheltenham Festival. So obviously we'll find out more when the weights come out, and we'll see how bad it is. And I'm sure Kevin Blake will be all over that as usual. But yeah, I don't see it being a massive difference.
We'll move on to the selections then. I don't know how many weeks we are in. I want to say it's week 9, so there'll be like 10 or 11 selections from you guys, and then 9 or 10 from me. What? We're on to episode 7.
I think so.
This is episode 7.
Well, I make notes by the episode number, and I'm pretty sure, unless I've completely lost the plot, it's 7. I know this is a painful process recording with us, mate, but to exaggerate it by 2, it's not been that long, okay?
Maybe I've just got it wrong with the amount of selections that you've had. So maybe you've had 9 selections.
Yeah, and I'm probably bringing the number back down to how many that actually might turn up. So maybe that's probably getting things wrong.
All right, we'll hop straight into it anyway. I've gone for one. It's a bit of an obvious one, if I'm honest with you, but happy to take the price because I do think it will shorten, providing a few horses come out that I think will. So that's Telmesomethinggirl for the Mayor's Hurdle. As I say, I think the market could fall apart. Royal Kahala is very ground dependent, also could go to the Stayers. Stormy Island's failed in this race a couple times, and obviously the form of her last run, where she only just managed to beat McFabulous, that isn't looking so good now. And Burning Victory, I just don't think it's all that good anyway. This obviously has been the plan the whole time as well. Her last run was rock solid. I'm just looking at it now. She was giving a lot of weight away, and she was only beaten a length by Heaven Help Us and Royal Kahala, but she was giving £5 to Royal Kahala and £8 to Heaven Help Us. So at the rating, she's going to be like 5 lengths clear of them. She obviously handles the track really well as well. I think she's a really solid bet, and most probably of the horses that are still at a bit of a price at 7-2, I think she's probably one of the bankers of the week at this point for me. And I'll head over to you, Jake, for your selection. But I don't think you like Telmesomethinggirl, so if you want to chuck a dart for it, feel free.
No, I see the angle on Telmesomethinggirl completely. It's just, I think she's just too short in the market, and there is one that I've got my eye on in the race, that I may end up putting up late in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, like, I can completely see the angle. It's just not for me, I'm afraid. But anyway, we're moving on to my selection, and it's going to come in the Coral Cup. Now, you may think it's a bit weird that I'm only putting this horse up. He ran like 3 weeks ago now, and that's Phil Duderry for Nicky Henderson. But the reason that I've been waiting is because he ran an Ascot handicap in January, and there's like an identical race this weekend. So I just wanted to make sure that they weren't going to run him again this weekend and completely blow the handicap mark. And to boot, Nicky Henderson also put out a Cheltenham stable tour this week where he mentions the race as his target for him. So that's obviously another major positive. But Phil Duderry, so he's a bit of a strange horse. So he came from France, where he had 2 starts over hurdles, and then he went to Joseph O'Brien, and they wanted to have him have a juvenile hurdle campaign with him, but they just couldn't get him right. So he ended up missing the whole of the rest of his 4-year-old season. And then he came back in November and he went straight over fences. So obviously it's a bit strange that, a horse would just go over fences with only 2 runs over hurdles. We don't see that very often over here. But he ran some nice races. So he was second, he was going to have second behind Call Reevy on his Chase Davy, but he fell at the second last, which was a bit of a story of his season in the end. But he then ran well at Navan a month later, and he won his beginner's chase. And this time he beat Brayside, who's a 145 horse by 3 1/4 length. He then chased home Envoy Allen in that Grade 3 Killarney Novice chase at Punchestown in January 2021. And he's only beaten 3.5 lengths by Envoy Allen that day. Obviously, Envoy Allen's rated 161. You can't take that from literally. He was giving quite a bit of weight away, but it still shows that he can get to a high level of performance. His season went downhill from there. He fell at Cheltenham in the plate. He was 5th behind Monkfish at the Dublin Racing Festival. Then he fell in the plate. Then he fell at the Punchestown Festival. And yeah, he just kind of fell out of love with fences. I think, obviously, chasing wasn't really his game. For some reason, though, this season they bizarrely started him off with Edna Bolger, so this is where it gets even more weird. And he was running a point-to-point, but he just obviously didn't stay the 3-mile trip over fences again. He ended up being pulled up. They went straight back to the drawing board with him and chucked him over to Nicky Henderson's, obviously over in England. Now, Nicky Henderson's had him for quite a while, which is obviously good. And they ran him in January, as I said, in that Ascot Holloway's handicap hurdle. And Phil Duderry ran an absolute cracker. So he was running off a mark of 138. He travelled through the race perfectly. He got to the front, and the whole time, Nico de Boinville didn't touch him at all. He then got overtaken by the Harris Geldon horse called Unexpected Party. He was running off a mark of 130 that day, and he just cruised on by, went to a lead, went and won it. And he's now rated 142, so he's got £12 for that victory. But Phil Duderry's, he was just in behind. As I said, Nico de Boinville barely touched him. He didn't go with the winner. He didn't try and go with the winner. He just gave him a nice spin. And then after the last, he did actually give him a bit of a squeeze. And he did, start to close again towards the line, which was nice to see. So you definitely know there's an engine under there. And he ran a really nice race, jumped well, and looks much more comfortable at home over those hurdles rather than the big fences. So if you look, he's been put up £3 for that to 141, which I think is more than fair. I think, that's the mark, obviously, that they're now putting fresh away for Cheltenham for. That I think that's absolutely fine. It's a good mark. But on the trends, he just ticks almost every box. So of the last 26 winners, 22 were rated no higher than 147. So tick. 15 of the last 16 had not run within 32 days of the festival. That's now going to be a tick because he's not running this weekend. 4 of the last 5 winners were 7-year-olds. Again, he's a 7-year-old. 17 of the last 21 winners had less than 10 starts over hurdles, and 8 of the last 12 were second season hurdlers. So he ticks literally every single one of these boxes. There's also a little bit of an angle that Dan found last year where some failed chasers have got a pretty decent record. So 2 of the last 3 winners were failed chasers that have come back over hurdles. So he's got plenty of experience. He's very unexposed over hurdles. Nicky Henderson's got a great record in the Coral Cup, winning 4 of the last 12. And Craig Niche also won that Holloway's handicap hurdle last season before finishing second in the Coral Cup. So yeah, I think he's got a great chance. 16-1 you can currently get without the non-run bet concession. But as Nicky has said, that it's pretty much his target. So happy to take that price without the concession. And yeah, I think he's got a great chance.
It's just the most baffling career progression I've ever seen in my life. Second in a grade 3 and then pulled up at a point-to-point. The only thing I would say that I'm just looking at his page now on Racing Post. The only thing I would say is a bit of a negative would be that he does seem fairly ground dependent. Wants a lot of soft ground. He's by Saint de Saints as well, so you'd imagine that soft ground is going to be in his favour. And on some quick ground in the spring, that might be against him. But as you say, he ticks a lot of the boxes. Dan, what about yourself? Who was your selection?
Well, you went for the Mares Hurdle, and I'm going to go to the Mares Novice Hurdle. And to be honest, I really struggled this week for inspiration. So much so that the two I had at the top of my list, neither had run outside of France before. I mean, one was Gaelic Warrior, who I think is well weighted, and the other has only run twice and even qualified for the race I was interested in. That's Olympic Man. So I've left those two alone, and I've ended up going back to Grangee, who I was pretty keen on. I think if you remember when we assessed the Solrena, and I've rewatched the race again, and I kind of stand behind the points I made then. She did brilliantly in bumpers last season. She beat Party Central and Brandy Love at the Dublin Racing Festival, and then was a very fair sixth in the champion bumper in a race that wasn't run to suit at all. And then she ended that campaign with another graded win. So a really smart bumper mare. And she made a really nice hurdling debut as well in November, I thought. The form of that race is not great, to say the least, but she won with plenty in hand, and it was a very satisfactory debut. And to quite surprisingly, I guess, Willie threw her in at the deep end next time out in the Grade 1 Future Champions at Christmas against the boys on just a second hurdle start. And although she was fourth of the four finishes there, that doesn't quite tell the full story. I think Paul Townend, who chose to ride her over the other two Mullins representatives, made a very aggressive move to go on from in between the second and the last, which may have not been the smartest idea given the way the race panned out in hindsight. And it probably just took the sting out of her finishing effort. But she was still only 4 lengths behind Mighty Potter, 3 lengths behind Free Stripe Life. And while they probably aren't at the upper echelons of the novice hurdle division, they are 2 rock-solid novice hurdlers. So I think that form has a very decent look to it. She then went to the Solrena, as just previously mentioned, where Willie tends to run his best mares. And I said it at the time, I'm adamant, having rewatched it, that she would have been bang there if she hadn't taken that very soft fall late on. She wasn't best placed throughout. She was ridden quite patiently, whereas Allegory Lavassi and Brandy Love were ridden aggressively. But she was keeping on nicely under gentle pressure before jumping fine and just slipping on the other side. It was a really unfortunate fall, and I failed to see how she would have been far away as she stood up. And by all accounts, Brian Cooper was seemingly of the very same opinions, which bodes well. And on the plus side for that, I guess she avoids the penalty. She'll be ridden patiently, which really does suit the nature of the Mares Novice Hurdle. I think all bar Limini were in midfield or held up throughout the race. And that is because it's such a big field on the new course. It does pay to be ridden with a bit of patience. She'll get £5 from Allegory Lavassi, and that race really did set up perfectly for her last time. She's very professional, and I think she's a very nice mare going forward. But whether she deserves to be that short, as we've already kind of discussed, I'm not so sure. Brandy Love's erratic jumping really would put me off. I know others have pointed out that she jumped straight on her first start, but the memory of last time out is more pressing for me. And for all that going left-handed is going to help, there are plenty of times on the new course where there isn't an inside rail on the left to help. So in a big field, and she's now a very short price as well, I wouldn't be rushing to back her either. LS Bell's unlikely to run. She'll get £5 from Party Central. As I mentioned, she beat in a bumper last season, should they reoppose. So I just think she's probably a bit overpriced at the minute. I mean, she's 12-1, non-runner, no bet. And I think there's still 16-1 available in one place with Unibet, which if I had an account, I'd be all over. And maybe that's just because she's a result of her not being the biggest. She hasn't got the flashiest profile in the world. But when you break it down, she's a Willie Mullins trained mare that's won 2 graded bumpers, has graded form over hurdles. I just struggle to see why she's a 12-1 shot. I think she should probably be about 7-8-1, realistically speaking. I think she'll be about that on the day. And given the way I think the race will pan out, I think she's got a very decent each way chance here.
It'd be really rude of me to not let Jake talk about Grangee when the conversation is Grangee. So, Jake,
he's going to tell me she's rolled out for the season now, isn't
he? God, Jake,
yeah, no, I completely agree with. I think she's massively overpriced. Yeah, I
non-biased opinions here.
No, exactly. No, I mean, I put up Dino Blue in this series, but I put up Grangee early in the year, on my socials. Yeah, I think she's got a great chance. I think the 12s is a great price. And she was entered today, and the plan is to run. So let's just see what happens. It's going to be a cracking day, and fingers crossed, we can get a winner there for you.
Well, there we go. That's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Jump Show. We had Grangee talk. We had me sticking up a favourite. So nothing's changed really. But if you are enjoying the series, guys, do make sure.
I didn't mention the Kim Muir, so that's well, I just kind of did now, but yeah.
There we go. Wow, I had to get it
Cliche
in for the old Jump Show bingo. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, then please make sure to drop a like. If you have any questions at all, then please do drop them on our Twitter accounts or in the comments section below, and we will see you next week.